And we'll make a copy of this recording on how to take your operations and maintenance program to the next level. We'll share the recording with all of our attendees today in case you'd like to share it with others on your team. But in addition, John has also agreed to share a copy of his slide deck, a PDF, and there'll be a survey at the end of the presentation. And if you'd like to receive a copy of the survey, of the presentation, just let us know, and John will be happy to share that with you. All right, and John has agreed to stay until the end of the hour and do a Q&A. But feel free at any time during the presentation to type your questions into the question feature, and then I'll read them to John, time permitting, at the end of the presentation. All right, so without further ado, John, let me turn it over to you.
Great, thank you. And I'll also mention that from a resource standpoint, I created a web page on my site because I'm going to hit a number of different, mention a number of different resources as we move through this. I went ahead and put them conveniently on one page, so I'll give you all that link here as we get near the end as well. But our agenda, I'm one that I'm a big picture guy. I like kind of starting from the the high level and then working our way down into the details. And with that said, I always think it's good to kind of look at the state of the state, looking at the industry as a whole. Like I already indicated, it is maturing, but I want to give you guys some nice, little tidbits and some facts out there that might help you in selling your program. As part of that, we're going to look at, how do you deliver value in selling facility management, because those first few steps are going to be the key factors to helping you take your program to the next level, because, well, you got to sell your management on it first before you can really start getting a lot of these things in place, because a lot of it does require extra resources, funding, etc. And then we're going to look at, what are the components of a robust facilities program, or so O&M program. And then I want to get into, okay, well, how do we measure and improve? I'll, throw some KPIs that I like to use. And, I would take that as an opportunity too. If you guys want to chime in with some of your own KPIs you like to use, I'm always one that's trying to learn myself, so I would take that. And then again, we'll mention those resources and try to leave some time for Q&A at the end. So with that said, we're going to do our first poll question. So Rona, if you wouldn't mind getting that opened up for everybody. I wanted to just again get your perspective of how would you rate how your overall facility management program, your department, is doing. So we've got A, you're firing on all cylinders, things are running great. B, well, but hey, we can do better. C, you know what, we're making progress. You've got D, where we're still underwater, looking for a longer straw to breathe through. And then, of course, the last one is I have no idea how we're doing. So we'll give you guys a few seconds to pop those in.
Great. And as John mentioned, he likes to get an idea of who's on the line today. And it looks like we have about 70% of the votes in, so maybe we'll keep it open a few more seconds. And just type in your responses, whether A, B, C, D, or E best fits your case. All right, it looks like we've gotten all the votes, John, so let me go ahead and share this with you. So interesting, nobody said they're firing on all cylinders. I suppose that's why they're here today. But 30% say B, good, but could be doing a little better. 58%, the majority, said making progress, which is always good to hear. 12% said still underwater, and no one said they have no idea. So no A's and no E's, I guess that's a good thing.
I think I mean, we got a nice little bell curve going on there, so that works out well. And that doesn't surprise me at all. So, and I think it makes me feel better to know that, the majority of you are at that making progress, or even, hey, well, but can do better. And I really think that that's one thing that we, as a facility industry, when I present and I teach classes as well as consulting, and part of that, one of the things that I say is, if you'll never be bored in facilities, and if you're bored, you're not doing your job. Because as you guys know, there's always something we can be doing. There's always ways that we can be improving and driving more value, and that's really a good part of what we want to get into today. So let's thanks for those responses. Let's dive into the state of the state. Now, I have this image here because, unfortunately, I put a poll out on LinkedIn probably a good year ago of talking about, our relationships, how are we as facility folks viewed by our respective organizations? And one of those questions was, who's to blame? Is it our fault? Is it upper management's fault for not seeing the value we provide, et cetera? And thankfully, most folks were honest and said, hey, it's our fault as facility folks that, we're the ones that are doing it to ourselves. And that really is what this picture is trying to show you, is that unfortunately, as you can see from those stats that are given, we tend to be our own worst enemy. And that's something that, as many of you indicated in that previous poll, hopefully we're making improvements there so we don't keep shooting ourselves in the foot. But I'm sure there's a number of you that probably could go, yeah, I can give you examples, or as I like to call them, facility fish stories, where each story gets a little bit bigger. But you guys could probably share things that even happened somewhat recently where you go, yeah, we kind of messed that one up. And it's okay. It's just, are we learning from those? Are we progressing our program? I think to me the biggest stat is that first one where it says most maintenance organizations, this is just North America that the study was done on, operate between 10 to 40% efficiency. So if we flip that around, that means they're 60 to 90% inefficient. And yet that's the one thing we always say we need more of. Hey, I need more people, I need more money, and yet we're only efficient with 10 to 40% of that. So this is really where I think we have a huge gap that we need to bridge, and some of these components we're going to talk about today will help us to do that and shore those areas up so that it makes it easier for us to go to the bean counters, right, to those that control the purse strings, and say, hey, I need more resources, I need more people, I need more money. And if we show that we're doing a good job, good stewards of what they give us, hopefully they'll be willing to give us more. Moving on to the next slide here. With the firefighting, thankfully, most of you did indicate that you're making progress. With that, on the firefighting, these are just good stats that I get from upper management, right? Or I'll hear stories, from folks that I work with in the industry of that they're trying to get either equipment replaced or, hey, I need to get more help because we're just barely able to keep up with the corrective maintenance, not really able to get around to the PMs, right, where your PM strategy is the round to it one, right? You replace the filters, whatever, when you get around to it. One of the things I like to tell folks is that, well, you say that you can't afford to do it, but really the bigger issue is you can't afford not to do it. One of the examples I like throwing out there, because car metaphors usually work pretty well, but I'll throw the question out there, and I've done this with general managers and whatnot, and they get it. Is it cheaper to change the oil in your car or to not to? And you kind of see folks mull over that question for a second, and then they go, yeah, it's obvious. It's cheaper to change the oil, to do the right maintenance, than to have to go get a new car or replace your engine here way prematurely. And yet when we look at our buildings, how do we run our buildings? In many cases, unfortunately, we're operating in the to not to mode. So here's that cost. I just wanted to give you some of those few stats there of the how expensive it is for us to be reactive. And that's just cost. This does not take into account the impact on productivity, customer perception, anything like that. So that's the negative. I'm one that, I'm kind of the, as my wife calls me, the foolish optimist. I do try to find that silver lining, and I am trying to move us forward to something bigger and better. So let's look at the value of a robust program. So let's get the positive perspective. If you have a good facilities management program, O&M program, you can increase the production of the workforce, not just talking about your staff, the production of the workforce by 28%. And I've got a number of different stats on my website and whatnot. I should probably even include that article that refers to how you can, how temperature, humidity, and whatnot affect productivity of occupants. But that is a huge number, and that's a whole nother presentation that we can do a different time. The second bullet point there is double the productivity of facility staff. And when you look at how reactive most organizations are, even if they're 50% reactive, and ideally you want to be 80% scheduled, 20% reactive, we'll talk about those KPIs later. Again, this is a great way for us to show that we are getting as much out of our existing staff, including our contractors, as possible, because we have a good program, we're using them efficiently. Piper, through a study done on FacilitiesNet, reduced maintenance costs by as much as 50%. So, I mean, and you start seeing some of these numbers from different sources, they coalesce with each other, and they confirm that, yeah, I can reduce, if I double productivity of staff, I can reduce maintenance costs by 50%, and even reduce energy use by at least 15%, if not 25%. I mean, something as much as, the simplest HVAC PM you can do, change the filters, right? And yet, what's the one PM that we never seem to really get around to? Change in the filters. 15% energy loss by having dirty filters. And if I have dirty filters, that means I'm going to get dirty coils eventually, depending on what the unit is, which that's about 25 to 30% energy loss on dirty coils. And then if I, continue to go down this path, which I hope I have on the next slide, you know what? I'm going to do this poll real quick because I want for us to look at this rule of 110 and 1 briefly, I think in the next slide or two, and we're going to come back to talking about filters. So, Ron, if you wouldn't mind opening up to poll number 2, and this is for me to get a good gut check on, you gave me your perception of how you believe you're doing as a program. Well, how does your organization view you? Because I think that is really the battle that is the largest one that we need to make sure that we're winning. So the first one is trusted business partner. Are you a technical advisor, which they come to you, hey, we need some guidance on these facility concerns, or maybe you're looking at buying a building. Do they view you as, hey, he's the facilities manager, he keeps the lights on, keeps things running? Or do they have that perspective of, well, yeah, they're just maintenance, right? They carry tools and fix stuff. Or you get what I call the glorified janitor, and this is not anything against saying custodial janitors because they have extreme value, but it's that glorified janitor. Do they just have no clue what you guys are doing or the value you provide to the organization? So that's what I'm looking for there.
Okay, well, it looks like we've had about 2/3 of the votes in, and let us know. And again, these are just collected in aggregate, so please just give us your honest feedback. We're only going to share the results in aggregate. All right, a couple more seconds. It looks like everyone has voted, so let me go ahead and share it. So, John, what our listeners are telling us, 7% said they're considered a trusted partner. 25% say a technical advisor. And then 37% said they're considered the facilities manager. That's the largest number. 27% though said they're considered maintenance, and 4% did respond they're viewed in the organization as a glorified janitor. All right.
Okay.
Back to you.
And again, a pretty good, I'll say, bell curve distribution, very similar to the first poll, which I think probably shows us that progression of your program. And ideally, of course, we're trying to get to that trusted business partner. And this, to me, is why, again, I tell facility managers, if you're carrying tools, you're doing the wrong job. Because as a facility manager, facility director, your primary duty is to be out there managing relationships and selling. Okay, now hopefully not as cheesy as the guy in the picture here, but you're supposed to be out there selling the value of your team, selling the value that the department plays, not just at reducing costs, which is important, but really as enabling and equipping the organization to drive revenue, serve the public, whatever it is that your organization does. And that really is the connection that we're going to make here soon. On this selling facility management, I've got that, for the most part, most of us do come from a technical background. That's, pretty much inherent in the facility organization. That is changing. I have quite a few folks coming in more from the, I'll say, business side, office manager side, where they don't have the technical aspect, but they know how to manage people. And I almost think that they're one leg ahead of us that have come from the technical side, because even though technically, yeah, we could get out there, we could troubleshoot, that chiller or do whatever, that actually can become a weakness, because then we'll start using language that is more technical because that's what we get, and that's what we're trying to communicate to the executives, to the financial folks through that language that it's a different world for them. And we're trying to get them to understand our world when really we need to understand theirs so that we can sell what we do in their language. Second one, how do you measure and market? So when we get to measuring, we'll look at some of those KPIs. But are you then taking that data and promoting and marketing the organization? We'll talk about marketing plan a little bit later. And then the last part is marketing. I used to live in Phoenix, Arizona for a while, and I was there when Charles Barkley came to join the Phoenix Suns. So if you guys have been around, I'm kind of dating myself a little bit here. But when Charles Barkley was there, remember one of his things he said is, "I'm not a role model." And the problem is that there's a lot of kids out there wearing number 34 jersey running around. And the difference is that he says, "I'm not a role model." It's like, well, no, you are. You just might be a bad one. And that's really what I want for us to understand is that, if we're trying to sell, let's say as a facilities manager, you're trying to sell your organization, but if you've got 20 staff underneath you, your maintenance, grounds, custodial, and they don't get it, they're still role models. They're still selling the organization just badly if they don't see the value of what they do, the value of the team, and the impact that you guys have, not just on the bottom line from the cost standpoint, but on the revenue side of it as well. And that's where I have an article that I put out called selling from the grounds up. So talking about from grounds, custodial, all the way up through maintenance, of every single team member is valuable and what they provide. And I give you guys, I think, a link to that on this resource page, where there's a webinar that talks about how do you help to coach your team to come up with a elevator speech. Okay, that little 7-second tidbit of what do you do? If I'm a custodian, what do I do? I don't just pick up trash and clean toilets, right? How do I return value to the organization? Well, I'm in janitorial services in the facilities department, and my job is to make sure that the facilities are welcoming and pleasing and a safe place for visitors and for our customers, for the occupants. Because that really is what they're doing. Now, tactically, are they cleaning toilets, picking up trash? Yes. But the end goal is really what I want people to get, because that's what's going to sell and communicate the value of every single person on that team. Okay? So that is a really important aspect that we need to grasp, because a lot of us, we don't like salespeople, right? We don't like it when we're getting, you get a call on your cell phone while you're out there and about, and it's a number you don't recognize. It's a telemarketer, and you hate those. You don't necessarily like having sales guys try to cold call you and this and that, but you are a salesperson. That's your job, and it's just a matter of, are you doing a good job or a bad job? Now, how do you sell facility management? First things first is you have to understand your organization. You've got to understand what do they do? What is their business? How do they make money? If they're a public entity, like city, county, or even K-12 or higher education, it's not about revenue generation. You can call me a capitalist or a conspiracist. I don't care. It still all goes down to the dollar. Whether you're in a public sector or private sector, it's still about the dollar. We're trying to squeeze as much out as we can. And in this case, you have to understand how is money made, how is money spent, and what is the impact that you and your facility department have on those business drivers. You also have to understand the political motivators. Understand who the different stakeholders are, because everybody's got an opinion. Everybody has their thoughts on how things should be done, and you all probably hear all too often of how they think you should be doing facilities, because they all know better than us. But look and listen for those political motivators, because you can leverage those to help promote and sell your business case, your budgets, etc. Now, this rule of 110-1, if you've ever seen me present before, teach, read any of my articles, you're going to get this. The rule of 110-1 is not something I came up with. It's a nice old gentleman that when he first presented it years ago, I thought it was brilliant, because it's a very concise way to relay the value that facilities provides. So if you look at most organizations, their number one asset and expense, so just looking at cost, are people, right? It's the salaries, it's the benefits. And again, that's also where the money's made. Whether you're pounding keyboards, answering phones, making widgets, whatever it is, that's the $100. Okay, and this is all just meant to show relative orders of magnitude. That's the $100. Now, if I move down to the $10, Well, the second largest asset and expense for most organizations is us, facilities. Now, since most companies don't like going and laying people off in the public sector, it seems like they just never do that. They tend to then, if they don't want to lay people off and don't want to go through that hassle, well, they're going to go to number two, right? The second largest expense, which is us. So we've got a big target on our back. So we always have to be in that state of selling, and that's actually a large part of why I do what I do. I've seen too many good people get laid off because they did a bad job of selling themselves, and management made some really dumb decisions up the food chain that really just took the feet out from underneath them. But facilities is that second largest asset and expense, and the third typical largest expense for most organizations is utilities. With green and sustainability, that has had a huge focus, but really it's a small drop in the bucket for most organizations when it comes to their expenses. So I'm going to leverage that and use sustainability. Again, that goes back to those political motivators up above. But utilities is only going to carry me so far as trying to justify improvements to my program. I need to look at ways of showing that I can cut costs, and then even more importantly, to that $100, how is it that a new control system, improved maintenance, more staff is going to increase the productivity of the occupants, increase customer satisfaction? That's what we're looking for. And again, that's a whole other discussion in itself. So I do have resources for that we'll be getting to on that resource page here soon. Examples, and this is something that just to throw out there at you. Examples: thermal comfort, right? And we know that our primary complaint are hot and cold calls. And some things, if we again had a better control system, we're able to stay on top of our maintenance better. We did, good commissioning and test and balance with our, little TIs and small projects. We know that we could resolve, some of those hot and cold calls, hopefully a decent amount of them. But I want you to note, there's studies that have been done, and one of the studies found that for every degree that you get outside, so degree Fahrenheit, you get outside of the comfort range, okay, that's a whole debate in itself, so we'll have to worry about that later. But it's a 4% loss in productivity. A 4% loss in productivity for every degree you get outside the comfort zone. And so if you were to have somebody say, hey, we could reduce our utility costs by 10% if we adjust our temperature range by 2 degrees, well, one, we know us as facilities are going to get a lot more hot and cold calls, and then we're going to have to go around with our temperature guns and say, no, you're fine, you're not really hot, you're not really cold, this is just what we're doing. And this is executives saying that we're trying to save money in utilities. Problem is that they went and made a decision that was uninformed, because by them going and increasing that temperature range and putting more people in the uncomfortable zone, they now are losing productivity. And at that $100, and if I've got 1,000 people sitting in my building at $100,000 a year, per employee burden cost, right, which includes salary, benefits, et cetera, you're looking at millions of dollars in lost productivity the more we stray away from that comfort zone. That's just temperature. You've got those that said if they felt warm, they had 56% more errors in the work that they were doing versus those that were cold was 28%. So if you're going to err on one side or the other, go a little cold. Lower relative humidity. Most of us can't control for that, but if we make it too dry, that creates a problem as well. Indoor air quality. Remember when we said about changing the filters, cheapest thing you can do? Well, look at the impact that filters can have on the air quality. So that one study showed that just by them simply changing the air filters from the dirty to the clean, 9% increase in productivity. I mean, that is a big number. So again, if I take those, if I have management and I say, okay, at 1,000 employees per year, or 1,000 employees in the building, I've got a $100,000 burden rate per year. And if I went and if we do that math, I think it's like $10 million. And if I went to my boss and said, hey, what if I could increase our revenues by 10%? Or what if I could make you $1 million? You're going to catch their attention. One, they're going to say, what are you smoking? But you're going to catch your attention. But really, you can do that. I mean, it's soft money, but you can do that by helping to create a more productive environment. So that's the selling, the promoting. You need those numbers to help you market the program. Okay, and we're going to get into now what are the components, of course, how do we get there, but we have to understand this aspect first. So that's why I'm kind of harping on this a little bit, because this to me is where we've been the most efficient in actually being successful. Now, when it comes to coming up with that marketing plan, one of the things we need to do is look at what are the touch points. So are you running a small college campus, right, where everybody's there? Or are you running a global organization, national organization, where you've got all these different ways that you and your staff are going to be interacting with the customers, with the occupants? You've got your web page. So if hopefully you have a facilities web page, utilize that. Market yourselves. I mean, if they go there to see what the menu is in the cafeteria, and that's the main reason they go there, great. Well, while they're there, they're going to see our vision statement. They're going to see how we're doing on our goals. They're going to see my facility staff member of the month, right? And it may be Jose in custodial services, and this is what he's doing. This is how he's providing value. Or somebody just went and got their new certification or facility management degree. I'm going to highlight those because I want them to understand, the customers to understand what we do, that it does require skill sets, that we do return value. If you want to go old school, use bulletin boards. Absolutely. Along the main corridors where the bathrooms are, where the break rooms are. Take advantage of those spaces to market and promote your team. Newsletters, emails. If your company has a newsletter they put out, see if you can squirrel away a corner of it that you guys provide, tidbits each month, and a good way to help coach and sell. Get the occupants to buy off on maybe changes you're making, keep them informed. But again, marketing and selling the team. Service desk, of course, is a touch point, face to face. So every single employee out there is going to be, all your staff are going to be interacting with the occupants, customers on a daily basis. I know we focus on, hey, we want to make sure that they're trained from a skill standpoint. What about their people skills? Are we giving them soft skills training? I mean, that has been something that has come up quite a bit in a number of meetings that I've had with clients, that that's something that we really need to start implementing, is giving that coaching. They've got the technical side. Let's coach them on the people side, because really managing the relationships is what is going to help us to be successful. All right, so we'll move on to the next slide here, which is going to take us to poll number 3. And this one is just trying to gauge, where does your facility department sit right now? So I'm looking at, to whom do you report? Do you report directly to the C-suite, to one of the COO, CFO, whoever, CEO? Do you report to a VP of real estate and facility management, or something to that effect? Maybe it's director of operations. Or do you report to another department, such as human resources, legal, IT, or maybe none of the above fit you? So hopefully you can fit yourself into one of those first 4.
Okay, great. I see the responses are coming in. And again, this will be our last poll question. And it's always good to benchmark yourself against others here and see who's on the line with you today. It looks like we've gotten about 2/3 of the votes in, so I'll leave it open a few more seconds.
Now, I didn't ask, of course, do you like who you report to? So I didn't want to ask that question. This might get a little too hairy.
Yes. Boy, now way more votes are coming in. You got their attention. Okay, let's go ahead and share what we've got here. And now this is a little different, not quite a bell curve, but 13%, John, say they report to the C-suite. 6% to a VP real estate or some VP level of FM. 60% are part of the operations group, director of operations of that group. 12% report through to other departments, and 9% say other. All right. Okay.
No, that's good. I expected actually D to be higher, but I think eMaint's pretty strong in the manufacturing sector, which would make me understand why you guys might report to the director of operations. Which again, that is a challenge in itself, because your facilities, you're the background, right? Whereas if you report to the director of operations, well, he likely was somebody that came from the operations side, that is the line, the production line. So he's going to focus, or she's going to focus more on that, the throughput, and maybe worry less about the roof that actually keeps the water from leaking on their production line. So that in itself has challenges, but at least you can be tied to that revenue stream. The facility industry as a whole, most facility departments actually report to HR, which still just blows me away. So the fact that the majority of you are director of operations, and it makes me very happy to see that there are some of you that did select A and B, because ultimately that's where we need to get. There's something that I call facilitopia. Okay, so that's my utopian view of facilities. And one of the tenets to facilitopia is that there will be a facilities representative at the executive level. Because if we're managing the second largest asset and expense for most organizations, it would make sense for us to have a VP of real estate and facility management, for example, right? So that's hopefully the direction that we're going, and I'm seeing more of those VPs, and the fact that I think we had 12% of you say that that's what you were, great. So that's all progress, and that to me is, if we can keep that end goal in mind of what we're trying to do, where we're trying to get, I think you'll see if, my thought is that if we individually can raise the bar within our own facilities programs, we're ultimately going to raise the bar as a whole for the overall industry, which will drive to, towards that facilitopia of getting folks in to some of those VP positions, to really getting more wages for a lot of our facility staff. Because, my neck of the woods especially, they're drastically underpaid for what they do and for their skill sets. So those are some of the things that I'm trying to, hopefully we can, by us working together, can bridge that gap. What is a robust program? So now let's take it into, I've been saying, okay, we need to sell and market, but I need to have a robust program to sell and market, but I need to sell and market to get a robust program. So it kind of works both ways. So how would I define it? First, vision, mission, goals. Again, I told you I'm a big picture guy. You need to know where you're going if you're going to be successful. And so you got to have that vision, mission, and goals. We'll talk about each one of these here in the next few slides. Identify your priorities and criticalities. What matters to the organization? Having a good emergency response management program in place. Having a capital replacement program in place. We're going to, of course, define each of those. Defining your maintenance strategies. If I'm doing run to fail, preventive maintenance, predictive maintenance, condition-based maintenance, we'll look at those. Am I fully leveraging a CMMS? If you've got eMaint, for example, extremely powerful tool, and if you're using it to, manage your day-to-day operations, get service requests, dispatch work orders, and maybe collect some data, you're really short-selling the value that system can provide for you. Staff training and development, and then lastly, project management. So those are all important aspects that we're going to hit on here a little bit. And again, we can't dive deep into each one of these, but I will provide you resources that do allow for you to go and look at some of these a little bit deeper. So first one, setting a vision. It sets a very clear direction, and really what I'm trying to do is get it so that the vision that you create, as it says in the lower part, is it has to, one, align with the overall organization, right? So that means you have to understand the overall organization's vision, mission, goals. Make sure, boil it down so that you have your concise vision or mission, or even a vision. I don't care. Just make something where you bring it together, and then you use that for your team as to say, this is what we're about, so that everybody's on the same page. Everybody's trying to deliver that same message to the stakeholders, to the customers. And it really should, as one of the bullet points there in the middle of the page say, it should communicate your value proposition to the organization. Okay, so those are the key differences there that really helps us to tie that together. And so there's a whole webinar on how do you come up with vision, mission, and goals. So I'll give you that link so you guys can see that too. The next one is determining priorities. So as we said earlier, you have to understand your business, the business behind your organization. Understand what matters, the departments, the areas, and then of course the systems and the equipment that support those areas, those departments, because that will establish your criticalities, which are going to feed so many other things. You classify the critical areas, functions, and departments, and then you look at those last set of bullet points, the supporting systems. What's the interdependency? Do you have redundancy? And then, of course, what's the age and condition of those? Because it's one thing to say, yeah, that's important, but then when I look at that system and go, okay, it's at or beyond end of life, that gives me a heightened concern. It's heightened risk to the organization, especially if it's a higher criticality system. So that means it's going to boil up to the top of my list when it comes to doing that capital replacement, which we'll talk about here in a second. So determining your priorities is extremely important for you to be able to do that. And then, coming up with those criticalities, and I think we give you some resources on that as well. The next is going to be that emergency preparedness. So once you identify those high priority, those critical areas, well, you take that same information and feed that into your emergency preparedness, because most organizations, I'll say facility departments, when I ask them, do you have an emergency response management program, I'll get yes as an answer. But as I start peeling back the layers of the onion and asking them more questions, really what we discover is that, well, their organization, like their company, has a disaster recovery business continuity plan, but they, as facilities department, do not have emergency operating plans, emergency operating procedures. They do not have an incident management process, at least not one that's documented. They've got their call list, but do you actually have an escalation protocol? So if you can't get a hold of person A, you move to person B, if you can't get a hold of person B, and so forth. Do you have those in place? Do you have routine training on the EOPs, on the processes? Do you do those on a regular basis, at least annually? Do you do drills? I'm one that recommends that you should do at least quarterly tabletop drills, and ideally I like doing an annual full-scale drill where you've got the emergency services there with you, and it's a good way to communicate to the stakeholders that their safety is important, but it also helps to build relationships with the emergency service departments there within your community. So all very important aspects, and those are usually key areas that are missing, which leaves us reacting and flying by the seat of our pants at 2 in the morning when something blows up. Okay. Now the next part is going to be that capital reinvestment plan or capital replacement program. Acronym's the same, CRP. Basically what it does is you put together ideally a 1, 3, 5, 10-year capital expenditure forecast. And really it needs to be something that's a steady state spend so that there's no surprises. And that's what you're going for with respect to for management, because if you're able to give them basically your capital expenditure for, let's say 10 years out, and it's a steady state spend, let's say it's $3 million a year, allowing for inflation each year, it's now manageable and predictable. And they're managers too, so you're giving them something they can. And I saw a presentation once by BYU, Idaho, and the LDS Church had started this well over 30 years ago, where they put a capital reinvestment program together, and basically they said their annual capital budgets were pretty much rubber stamps because there were no surprises. And so this to me is going to be, this is an absolute necessity for you to be able to start digging out of this deferred maintenance of our equipment that's at or beyond end of life. The other thing to this is by you having the CRP and having the data, you're then able to communicate to management the cost of, I'll say, bad decisions or uninformed decisions. Because right now, if we go in with our laundry list of our, basically our wish list, if we go in with that and we know that, of our list of 20, we're going to get like maybe the top 3 or 4, we're not really showing them the consequences of them saying no. But there are financial consequences that have a long-term effect. They need to see that, and that's what this type of forecasting is going to do for you, okay? And, many of these, if you can get an actual system to do, it's capital placement planning in it, but many of your CMMSs allow you, of course, to do user-defined fields and whatnot, and you can actually track your capital replacement expenditures and this plan inside the CMMS, okay? So there's a whole other webinar that we did on that one, I think last year for eMaint, so we've got a link to that in our resources. So we've got those priorities we defined early on, those fed into emergency response management, they're feeding into our capital replacement program, now they're feeding into our maintenance strategy, because that will help define what strategy should we go with. Is it run to fail, which is a legitimate maintenance strategy? Hopefully it's not our primary maintenance strategy, but it's a good legitimate one. I mean, if it's a low priority, low cost to replace, run to fail. Preventive maintenance, it's schedule or calendar based. Predictive maintenance, and that's one thing I like about eMaint, is that it does allow for you to incorporate your predictive maintenance data. I'm a very big proponent of PDM. I was a vibration analyst in a past life, and I think that we should be leveraging predictive maintenance more, because in most cases it is non-intrusive, and unfortunately in some cases we can actually do more harm than good by doing some PMs. So that's where if we can replace it with a PDM, that makes a lot more sense, and it usually will not require downtime, again, non-intrusive. Lastly, where we want to start getting to is this condition-based maintenance, where it is leveraging some of those predictive technologies, but now I'm also incorporating other data like building management data, so your building control system, maybe data from rounds and readings, and any other resources that I pull together, and then it alarms me and says, hey, we're not running optimally, it's time for us to go and do XYZ. Simplest example of condition-based maintenance is a lot of you on your air handlers, if you got bigger air handlers, you probably have magnehelic gauges, right, where you're looking for the pressure drop across the filters. Well, that's that's condition-based maintenance, because you change the filters when you get to a certain pressure drop. So now do we have that tied into our control system and alarm setup that says, hey, it's time to change the filters? That would be pretty cool. And again, I'm seeing that, but it's usually just more at the gauge level that you have to do it in the field. But that's where we want to get to, where we're incorporating that type of information and continue to do things smarter. Fully leveraging your CMMS. I believe, so we just talked about building control systems. Building control system is the nervous system for your facility, for your building. Your CMMS is the nervous system of your facilities program. Okay, it is a business tool. Yes, it is there to help manage day-to-day ops, but you should be using the information you collect in that CMMS to drive business decisions, to help you develop your budgets. You should be able to easily get, let's say, a 90% budget out of your CMMS, both operations and capital, if you have it set up right. And then you take that data that you're getting out of the system. Again, there's some of these KPIs we're going to look at, and some of these other ways that we affect the overall organization, and now that feeds into marketing your facility management program. Okay, I mean, so you can see how all this is intertwined, and these are all different building blocks that you've got to start having them in place in different ways, and because they will bolster each other and they feed off each other. The next is we identified is assemble a strong team. So whether you have in-house or outsource, training development is important. So if I'm outsourcing, I want to know, what do they have for a training program? What certifications do they do? Are they continuing to better themselves? Same thing I have to ask, for my in-house staff. What am I doing for them? Am I showing them a career path? Do I have development plans for them? And the other advice that I give is, when you go to look at, hey, I need to build a strong team, well, let's look at what you want, okay? So let's put together, if you could put together your dream team, if you will, so going back to, Charles Barkley reference there, we could put together our dream team. How would it look? What skill sets would we have? What number of people, this and that? And then we do that gap analysis. We go, okay, well, what resources do I have now? What's my current staff? And what's that gap? And then can I bridge that gap through training, maybe hiring additional resources, whatever it is. But those are things we need to do. And then, of course, the soft skills training that I mentioned earlier. And then I have to add succession planning. I know there's facility managers are thinking about this more. I know I hear from a lot of them that they're having a difficult time finding who might be their successor. But even within your facilities department, we know that there's a shrinking skilled labor pool out there, and it's going to get tougher and tougher. So we might have to start grooming our own, either internally or hiring externally, maybe the unskilled or not as strong as we want, and build within. Okay, so but we need to have those plans in place, because it will jump up and bite us in the rear if we're not paying attention, and we're already there, and it's just going to get worse. Project management, I think this is the last one that we had. Thankfully, when I go and teach classes and whatnot, or do presentations, depending on the topic, I'll ask, how many of you are now starting to get involved or be invited to that design and construction table? I'm seeing more and more hands come up, which is great, because used to we were kept off in the corner, keep facilities away, because all we're going to do is ask questions. make their lives difficult, and they won't be able to value engineer out stuff that we really need, and and they won't be able to hit their budget and their schedule. But since we're going to be owning and operating that building for the next, I don't know, 4 or 5 decades, and that construction only takes about 18 months to 2 years, I'm thinking we need to be involved in the design and construction, and we're starting to get there. And that's something that we should be trying to be, that trusted advisor, right? Not somebody that's there to cause problems and stir it up, but be that trusted advisor. Define standards, even in the public sector, where say, well, we got to go low bid. You can still put together specs that go out as part of your bids that define standards, of even just something as simple as, your door and lock hardware that you use. I mean, because that's extremely expensive in itself. So just simple little things that you can do to define standards to make your lives easier in the near and long term. Commissioning, again, I'm a big proponent for commissioning. I think it's an absolute necessity on any project, especially where you've got, let's say, HVAC systems, control systems. You should have commissioning. It pays for itself, okay? There's a whole nother article and presentation that I have resources for that. And then that transition to operations. Do we budget for the construction of the project, but are we budgeting for additional staff to come on board during the commissioning, during the testing phase? If being facility staff, how about training? Is that getting done? Are we getting our equipment set up in our CMMS? Are we getting the procedures developed? Are we getting service contracts done? Are we budgeting for all that and have the resources to accomplish that before we ever accept the building? I know it's crazy, isn't it? But that's what we really should be doing, and it never happens. But that's really allows us to get ahead of the curve, and we need to be on a new building. Let's start off right. And then, of course, thorough documentation. Drawings, O&M manuals, etc. Are they electronic? Are we storing them in our CMMS? Are we making them readily available to our staff so they can, and even our contractors, so they can have that at their fingertips in the field? We need to be able to have that information. And I mean, I make that part of substantial completion, that I have my O&M drawings, I have as-built before I give them substantial completion, because I'm just kind of a jerk that way. But I want to make sure I have the information I need for my staff. Analyze and improve KPIs. So here's again a string of them that I like to use. Your PM to CM ratio, all right, so preventive maintenance to corrective maintenance, work order percentage ratio, percent complete. So especially with respect to our PMs, I'm looking at by priority or criticality. So I should be getting 100% of my priority ones done, hopefully 100% of my priority twos, and then I start, ratcheting it down from there depending on, how much deferred maintenance I might have to dig out of. Staff utilization. I'm one that, and it's not to be big brother, I'm one that I like capturing 100% of my staff's time against work orders. Even if it's administrative, I'm going to have a weekly administrative work order they can put their time against for training, meetings, etc. But I have to show where they're spending their time in order for me to justify getting more resources. Because if I can show, look, this is where I'm using all of my folks, and my backlog's still growing, and then of the backlog, this is the skill set that I need, and it's a full FTE. It's a full FTE. Then that helps me to go and pick resources and tell it and justify what resource I need. Okay, and then again, all this data should be feeding into your marketing and program. So benchmarking cost data, very simple stuff. Resources you can get from, IFMA's got their Building Information Exchange, which is available on IFMA store. I bet you eMaint probably could even help get some of that data together. And then if you're in certain industries like higher education, you've got APA. If you're in healthcare, you've got ASHI. All good industry information, so you can benchmark yourself. Because a lot of us say, hey, we want to be world class. Well, what does that even mean? Let's make sure that we're actually, one, coming up with reasonable goals and benchmarks, and so we can make progress, but then two, that we have some substance right behind what we're doing. So we're running short on time here. So this is just our quick summary, our review. So the things that we hit, I mean, again, selling, that rule of 110-1, I've got resources that will show you for that. Vision, mission, goals, how do you come up with those? Priorities, criticalities, and then emergency response management, capital replacement program, maintenance strategies, and leveraging your CMMS. We'll see on the next page that we have those resources available for you. So basically, if you go to my website, so sm360consulting.com/eMaint, /eMaint, you will have all those different resources there, and most of those are webinars, and they're all about an hour or less long. And you can watch them at your leisure. Okay, so you have those resources available. And with that said, Rona, let's go ahead and open up to questions with the time that we have left.
Sure.
And then I'll move to the next slide here with some Q&A.
Okay, and please go ahead and type in questions. We have time for a couple before the end of our hour, but bear in mind I will be sharing a link to the recording, and if you check the survey at the end, John can send you a copy of the presentation, all right, because I know there's a lot of material here. Someone was asking, John, and this is probably a topic of a whole other webinar, but when you mentioned having a CRP, he was asking how you integrate that into your CMMS. All right, you have a capital replacement plan. Can you just maybe set up a framework for how a capital replacement plan and a CMMS work together?
There's pretty much just a few different fields that you need to do this in your CMMS. Most of you're going to have in your CMMS, you're going to have, as a default field, it's going to be the install date. The second might be it's either initial cost or it's replacement cost. So I'll need those two. And the third one that I need to have is what is the life expectancy? And in many cases, that's where you have to use like the user-defined field function and add that so that you can put in there, hey, it's a rooftop unit, we should be able to get 15 years out of it. So if I have those three fields alone, so install date, cost to replace, or if it's install cost, I just add on inflation basically when I go and export this into Excel. And then, of course, it's life expectancy in years. Those three right there will help me to at least put together the framework for the capital replacement, the capital expenditures. The other thing that is a nice to have is a condition field. So is the system at it's, what I would expect it to be from a condition standpoint for its life expectancy, or is it better or below? And then, you can set up reports in your CMMS to help extract that information so that it's going to look, I call it a schizophrenic budget, because you're going to have, some years where, hey, you need $12 million and the next year you need $2 million. Well, that's not reasonable. So now you've got to start, this is usually your first pass. Now you do that extract of the data into an Excel format, you smooth it out, and then you go back in and update some of those replacement dates for the equipment based off of priority, and you get that steady state spend. So that's you doing it, I'll say the poor man's way, you doing it yourself. There are companies that will come out and do this for you. Okay, so you can hire folks to come out and do the facility condition assessments, and they can help you gather the data and even have systems to help you do this too. So there's a few different ways that you could accomplish it.
Great. And John, you work with so many clients in so many different industries, and as you noted, so many folks here are in the manufacturing sector. And are there some challenges that you've seen unique to that group that you just want to call out in the remaining minutes?
Sure. We talked about the difficulty, the challenge of, like if you say report to the director of operations, you as facilities, well, you're not where the money's made. You're a cost center. You're an overhead. You're a necessary evil, which, yeah, it's kind of true. But again, we're an enabler of the production. And within that manufacturing sector, I think you guys have the benefit of, how much downtime costs. How much rework costs. So if you can, make sure you have that information, incorporate that into the data you collect so that when you do have a facilities event that negatively impacts productivity or has the potential or increases the risk, there's a dollar sign associated with it. Because then, you don't hide that information, and try to keep it quiet because you really don't want anybody to, air your dirty laundry. I want to use that. I call it turning a negative into a positive. I want to use that negative and say, this is why I need money to replace this equipment so that this doesn't happen again. So I think that's a benefit that you guys have in the manufacturing sector, is because that information is readily available to you versus if you're like in an office environment, it now becomes squishier. They become soft numbers when you start trying to figure out what's the cost of loss in productivity of staff. So those are soft numbers, but they're still legitimate numbers that we can use to sell our program. It just makes it tougher in the office environment versus the manufacturing sector.
Well, very good. I know that very often when clients are looking for CMMS, they ask us how they can help justify the cost. And we even developed a little ROI calculator to say these are some of the, because even when you look at the cost of purchasing a program, here are some of the offsets. Well, John, as always, it's a pleasure, and I learned so much on these presentations, as do our users. And I'd like to thank you for sharing this, and thank you to our listeners today. There's so much information here. We'll send you the link to the recording. John can send you his PDF, his slide deck. Please check out the resources. And for those of you that are eMaint clients, we do have we connect on the web as often as we can. We're always a phone call or the internet away, but we also do like to meet you in person, and we have training days and events for both clients or even clients who are just considering a CMMS, maybe don't have one, and we have them coming up in these cities in the upcoming months. So hope to see you there. And again, thank you, John, for putting this together. And you have a real knack of making high-level concepts very actionable and digestible that I know our listeners appreciate, and we do as well. So thanks again, and please take a moment at the end and share your thoughts on the survey. Tell us what other topics, people like John that have such a wealth of knowledge, what else is on your mind? What's keeping you up at night? What other topics of value can we bring you in this hour we spend together once a month? And please keep the dialogue going. So thank you, John.
Thanks again, Rona.
Have a great
I appreciate it.
Thanks. Have a great day, everyone.